those sick bastards would do. Anything for a torture these days. And that's how it had been for the last 2 years. The war was over, and the enemy had won. Voldemort had killed Harry during the summer before their 6th year, when he had stupidly ran away from his aunt's house. Hermione had known that the death of Sirius had affected him, but she thought he was old enough for such sense. Obviously not. He had doomed them all. Upon returning to platform 9 3/4, Hermione had found it crawling with Death Eaters just waiting for them, and they had all walked right into their trap, like tiny ants about to be squashed beneath their feet. So many people had died that day. Hermione shivered at the memories that never ceased to erupt from within her, and others had been taken away to become slaves. She would never forget what the Death Eater had said to her. You're our property now. And that's how it had been ever since. Along with hundreds of other young witches from around the world, Hermione had spent the past few years living in this disgusting camp. She'd had it really easy. She'd had it easy, really. Almost every day they would watch in horror as one of their friends was dragged off by the Death Eaters, simply to be used for their pleasure. And so far, Hermione had made it under the radar and spent all her time carving wands out of the trees they were forced to cut down from the surrounding forests. As they had been told on their first day, the more wands that the Death Eaters had, the more muggles they could torture. Hermione hated herself for what she was forced to do. She hadn't heard from her parents since that day at the station, and had no idea if they were still alive. In some ways, she almost wished that they were dead. It was a better alternative. Every night, she and the girls that she stayed with would sit by the tiny fire and tell stories of their time at school and home, as if wishing for it hard enough would make it real. Lavender Brown was there too, and there wasn't a single night that Hermione hadn't lied awake listening to her best friend cry herself to sleep. Most nights went by this way, but if they were unlucky, the Death Eaters would choose their little camp for some fun. Drunk and high off their own power, the men would laugh to each other as they preyed on the girls one by one. Hermione had been forced to kiss so many disgusting old men that she couldn't keep track anymore. Their beards would sting like wire being scratched around her soft cheeks, and their tongues would push inside her mouth like giant worms, wiggling about for their reward. She had had scabby hands crawl beneath her clothes, feeling her breasts and creeping into her underwear. She was lucky though. Lavender had been made to do much worse.
Cindy said, "What the fuck is this?"
What do you mean? Cindy's watching your stream?
Yeah.
Hi, Cindy.
Marissa too.
Hermione, what are you doing? Lavender had suddenly appeared in the doorway of their tent, cracking through Hermione's thoughts. She dropped the pile of wood that she had been holding and hurried forward to snatch the letter from her friend's hands. I have to go, Lavender, Hermione said quietly.
Vanessa is here. What?
Oh God, the Malfoys. Lavender scrunched the letter in her hand and hugged Hermione tightly. I have to go, Hermione whispered, a tear running down her cheek. Will you come back? Lavender stepped back, and Hermione saw that the other girl had tears on her own face. She shook her head. I don't know. The truth was, she did know. No girl that had ever been taken had ever returned. If Hermione was going into slavery for the Malfoys, who are one of the most powerful families around and infamous for their hatred
Bro,
of
why are you
Malfoy,
showing feet for free?
she doubted she would even last till the end of the day. Mudblood, said Mudblood.
Oh, that's hot in my room.
Hermione sighed. She had only been at the Malfoy Manor for an hour, and already she had heard that word hundreds of times, usually directed at her. Mudblood. Narcissa Malfoy screeched at her. Yes? Narcissa pointed her wand at Hermione as she sat scrubbing the tiles on the floor, and a searing pain pierced her cheek. Don't you talk to me like that. Narcissa hovered over her in rage as Hermione gingerly felt the blood clotting her cheek. Sorry, my lady, she answered as politely as she could, while trying not to grimace, using the name that she had been instructed to call her new mistress with. That's better, Narcissa purred. You know, I think you're making the floor dirtier with your mud blood filth. Go down to the kitchen and start on my dinner. But make sure to wear gloves. I don't want to catch illness off of a disgusting little tart like you. Lovely, Hermione thought. But she said nothing as she got up and headed toward that door that Narcissa was pointing at. It led to a steep staircase that went down into the darkness, and Hermione could hear the distant scampering of tiny feet. As she made her, are you enjoying this, William?
Yes, he is. Please go on. Finish the entire
Mm. And Hermione, as she made her way down the stairs as carefully as she could, she wiped the blood from her cheek sourly. So far, she had been forced to kneel and worship, as Narcissa told her all the rules of the house, with a few insults thrown in here and there. Then she'd been set to work scrubbing the tiles with a toothbrush, while Narcissa stomped about in her staggering heels. Thankfully, Hermione had yet to see either of the Malfoy men about. Surely Lucius would be even worse than his wife, not so kind on the punishment side. But Draco she was most dreading seeing. As if her own thoughts were conspiring against her, an instantly recognizable voice suddenly floated up to her from below. Honestly, if you bloody elves were any slower, I'll have you all whipped again. I asked for that steak a full 2 minutes ago. Oh God, it's him. Hermione suddenly reached the bottom of the stairs with a stumble, and as she grabbed the nearby stacks of pots and pans to steady herself, she felt them give way and come crashing to the floor around her. When the noise had finally died down, the only sound left was that of Draco Malfoy as he sat on a throne-like chair, laughing coldly at her. Very good, Granger, was all he could muster to say as he clapped. The sound resonated off the walls and chilled Hermione to the bone. The house elves that had gathered around smiled uneasily, as if they didn't dare to disagree with his humor, as they rushed forward to help him pick up the pots. Stop, all of you, Malfoy suddenly commanded, and each elf froze in their tracks. Get back to my food. Granger, pick up that mess you just made. Hermione gritted her teeth and stayed where she was. Malfoy smirked. Now, Granger, or you'll find out the hard way that the Malfoy men are not as kind as the women. Begrudgingly, Hermione bent over and began to replace the stack that she had ruined, her cheeks burning in humiliation and shame. Granger, where are your manners? You're to call me sir at all times. Understood? Yes, sir, she mumbled furiously. No, actually, I would prefer master. All right? Yes, master. Hermione finished her job and stood up, avoiding his gaze. She wanted nothing more than to get away from him as fast as she could. Malfoy stood up and slithered toward her. I'm disappointed in you, Mudblood. I thought you, of all people, would put up more of a fight. He towered above her, and Hermione had to strain her neck to look into his face. His cold gray eyes were filled with laughter, but it was far from inviting. I don't waste words on those too weak and too stupid to comprehend them, she spat at him. Expecting him to rear in anger, Malfoy instead laughed again in her face. Granger, come to my room tonight at midnight. If you're late, I'll find you. Ooh. He strode past her and made for the stairs, but she wasn't ready to be such a willing slave. No. He stopped in his tracks and turned back to her. Excuse me? Fuck you, Malfoy. Finally, he looked angry. He walked back toward her and reached out so fast she didn't even register that he had grabbed her wrist, until he bent it up painfully. Listen, Granger, I summoned you to my home expecting you to have some bite. I'll take great pleasure in breaking your spirit. But if you dare speak to me like that again, you'll what? Set your mummy and daddy on me? Hermione winced even in her own head at her daring, but it was too late to take it back now. His eyes flashed dangerously, and he licked his lips. Hermione felt a shiver pass over her as he leaned toward her. She could feel the heat of his breath on her cheek. I could do much worse, he whispered into her ear. She gulped slightly and he stepped back again, a look on his face that she couldn't comprehend. He looked, hungry. Now you will meet me. He squeezed her wrist tighter and she gasped in pain. In my room tonight. Understood? Yes, she mumbled, unable to look away from his eyes. Yes, what? Yes, master. He let go of her wrist suddenly, and Hermione fell back a few steps. As she stared at him in pure loathing, his eyes slowly left her face and traveled down her body, taking in every curve of her figure. His eyes lingered over her breasts and he smirked. Hermione felt her cheeks burning and crossed her arms quickly. Midnight. Don't be late. So, Hermione was pacing around that gloomy kitchen, stirring a bowl of gravy with a giant wooden spoon. So, it was Malfoy that summoned me. But why would he do that? It had been several hours since he had left her in the kitchen, and although it was still bustling with house elves, she was lost in her own world. Nothing eventful had happened since, except for the occasional ringing of the horrendous series of bells that were set in the walls and above the sinks. Apparently, each bell was for a different elf, and depending on the number of times it rung, one for Lucius, two for Narcissa, three times for Malfoy, they were required immediately at the side of that person. From the number of bells upon the wall, Hermione wondered why they even needed her. Evidently, they already had too many servants. Why would Malfoy ask for me? And more importantly, why do I have to go to his room later? Does anyone know why Malfoy would? Does anyone in the audience have any idea why Malfoy would want Hermione to go to his room at midnight? Hmm? Anyone have any ideas? Darren, Jeannie, William? Darren? Darren?
Darren's in bed.
Darren's in. Man, is anyone even listening? So many possibilities filled her head that she didn't want to stop to think about a single one of them. Surely he would have some form of torture for her, probably a whipping, like he had done to the house elves. That sounded like something he would do. As long as he doesn't talk about Harry. Anything but that. I don't think I could sit there and not try to kill him if he said anything about. What? Wait. Oh, Darren's actually in bed. Whoops.
Wait, is that so? It's actually William sleeping.
Yeah, it's actually William sleeping.
That's really cool. Also, hi, Jeannie. It's been a while.
Hi.
Jack, also, it's been a while.
Hello, Henry.
Who's Anaelo? I have no idea who Yel is. Seems pretty cool. Don't y'all have school tomorrow?
I have an 8 a.m. But it's okay.
Welcome to the club.
Where's Darren? Darren has to unmute the thing.
Oh.
I'll keep reading the story.
Granger. Malfoy's low voice floated out of the darkness from straight. Wait, let me just Malfoy's low voice floated out of the darkness from straight ahead. Suddenly, brilliant light filled the room, and Hermione almost had to shield her eyes against it. As her eyes began to adjust, she let herself openly gaze around the room. The walls were made of the same shiny black surface as the doors, yet in the dazzling overhead light from an old-looking chandelier, Hermione could have said they were any color of the rainbow. The chandelier was the only source of light in the room. It was dripping with diamonds and emeralds, sending a shimmering ghost of green light upon everything beneath it. The wall across from where she stood was almost completely glass, a balcony just recognizable on the other side. There was a giant bed made with black and white sheets to her left, and a long ebony desk to the right. The rest of the room was relatively bare except for occasional dottings of furniture. A chair here, a table there. Everything looked perfect and exquisite, but Hermione couldn't look away from the window before her. Dark night revealed an almost full moon, its pale body surrounded by stars. It was beautiful. Granger. Hermione jumped. She had almost forgotten why she was here. She looked back to the desk to see that Malfoy was sitting before it, leaning back in his chair. He was already watching her with a satisfied smirk. Hermione opened her mouth to pour out all the frustrations that had built up since dinner. How dare he do that to her? Why was Seamus there? Was he a Death Eater? Was he under the Imperious curse? And why had he done that to her? But she couldn't find the words. Malfoy rose from his chair and slinked toward her like a predator in the jungle. He stopped when he was less than a meter away, so that Hermione had to strain her neck to look up at him. Did I say you could speak? Malfoy cut her off smoothly as she found the strength for words. As she finally found the strength for words. You, Granger, hold your tongue. I don't want silence. Malfoy roared at her. Hermione jumped and felt a tear of shock spill from her eye. Dear, dear. Malfoy was smiling again as he reached out to wipe the tear away. His hand was warm as he cupped her face, but his thumb scraped painfully down her cheek, and Hermione couldn't help but flinch at his touch. She tried to move away from him, but he held her still, forcing her to look up at him. Did you enjoy dinner? He asked her, his lip curling. Well, he shook her gently. He shook her slightly. No, she whispered. To her dismay, her voice was shaking, and she could feel the tears forming in her eyes. From Malfoy's growing smile, she knew that she was crying. Didn't you like seeing all your old friends? This time all Hermione could do was shake her head. But they like seeing you. Only because I'm your slave, Hermione spat out, sick of his little game. Yes, you are. Malfoy grinned. His other hand reached out to hold her other cheek so that she was trapped between his fingers. All mine. Hermione didn't answer as his fingers gently increased their pressure, squeezing her head tightly. And my first order is for you to stop crying right now. Hermione tried, breathing heavily, and she struggled to gulp in air. Stop crying right now. Malfoy's voice was much harder, and he held her so tight she let out a moan of pain. He let go of her in disgust and strolled away. Hermione massaged her cheeks and quickly wiped away her tears, ashamed that she had acted so vulnerable in front of him. Wait, hold on.
Jack,
What?
I'll go sleep.
Okay, well, I think it's time for me to go to sleep too.
Good night, friends.
Good night. You again.
Suminasai. Minasan.
Wait, Jack.
Hmm?
Are you in Waterloo or are you in Montreal right
I'm in Montreal right now.
Okay, so you're at Brossard.
Yeah.
Are you gonna go back soon since they've re-announced that they're opening, or?
It's on the 7th, I think.
Ah,
So
okay.
I'll probably go back next week.
Okay. And Jason's still here too?
For now, yeah.
Alright. Let's see. Alright, cool.
Right. Good night, everybody. Wait. Aaron said no. Where were you when stream was end? I was in bed, slept.
Oh shit. Yeah,
Oh,
I see William's feet.
well, I think it's time for William. Actually, I'll show.
Bonne nuit, William. outside, William. I'm back. I'm gonna sing you the Obito theme for you to fall asleep. Because I know how much you love Obito. Bonne nuit.